Here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Foam News Collective podcast. I'm KT. I'm here with Vile. No Grims today, but we do have a very special guest who I'll get to in a second because I want to make sure everybody knows that today is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. 2 days until episode release. So if anything big happens, which it feels like big things could happen between now and Friday, like this week in particular. Do you agree, Vile? Like,
yes.
There's a lot of things that are sort of like right on the tipping point.
There's a lot that's been kind of popping up lately. I've noticed that this week especially. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a slim week, and it's creeping up on a lot of stories.
Yeah. So you know, we'll be keeping an eye on it. But we are recording the podcast today, Wednesday. So anything that happens between now and Friday will not be reflected in the show. We got a bunch of interesting stuff to talk about today. We're going to chat a little bit about a teaser that got dropped by Walcom S7 of what he claims is a off-the-shelf blaster that shoots approaching 300 feet per second. Chat about that a little bit. We got questions from the Ko-Fi for our special guest. We have our trivia game to subject him to. And I want to talk a little bit about Etsy. We've had a couple different creators moving away from that platform, and we kind of want to talk about how viable it really is for our hobby going forward. And then I want to end the day with I've got a really big prediction that I want to drop, and I could be wrong about it, but there's a few different things kind of going on together that I think are pointing towards a really big change in the corporate side of what we do. So I want to sort of drop my prediction about that and get everyone else's thoughts on that. But first up, we're going to introduce and chat with our special guest, Foam Mando. How are you doing this evening? It's so great to have you on the show. I really appreciate too how much today feels like we get to just hang out with a pal on the podcast, because like getting to hang out with you at Maryland Mayhem, all three of us got to hang out. And just getting to come on here and chat about stuff just feels really, really nice. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for asking, and thanks for having me. And I have to say, I feel the same way. Hanging out with you folks at Maryland was really a highlight of the weekend for me. And now here we are hanging out again. I'm just super excited to be here.
Yeah, y'all are gonna get the chatty special, I think, today, because we're just kind of ready to vibe and talk about weird stuff in the hobby.
That's long form.
That's kind of where it's at. However, I should start with making sure that everybody listening knows what you're all about. Would you tell folks how you got connected with the hobby, how you got started, what's your background, give us the backstory?
Well, if this is long form, do you want the long version?
Sure. Yeah, hit us with it. We'll probably interrupt you.
Yeah, that's cool. Basically, I've been something of a maker or a creator my whole life. I've always felt the need somewhat therapeutically to be creating things. It's just always made me feel better. Typically with my hands, I did carpentry for many, many years. And what got me into the hobby was actually cosplay. I've felt for quite some time now that I'm something of a Mandalorian. Hence the identity and the tag and all that. And so in the pursuit of, having a proper Mandalorian outfit, part of that was the blasters.
Right.
Are well
part of your religion.
Exactly.
It's
part of the religion.
It's your religion.
And so in looking at that, there's within the Mandalorian culture in the cosplay world, there's something called the 501st you may have heard of. And it's a really wonderful organization. They do a lot of really great things. They do a lot of volunteering at children's hospitals, which is something I really admire and respect and look up to. But their requirements are very, very strict. We're talking screen accurate. And when you look at the blasters in particular, it cannot be functional in any way, shape, or form. They cannot fire or be capable of firing any type of projectile. If they started out as a Nerf blaster, they can no longer really blaster. And that's where I kind of put the brakes on it, because when I started looking into Nerf and looking on Nerf on YouTube and stuff, that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is something else altogether. And well, the cosplay stuff's been kind of put semi on hold, because meanwhile I've gone down this deep rabbit hole of foam flinging and met some friends and brought some friends along with me, and now I'm in pretty deep. And so that's kind of what got me into the hobby in itself, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, we're glad to have you here. So were you considering like going the 501st route
I
at one
was,
point?
yeah. I was, and
Yeah.
I still probably will eventually and have like the Nerf Mando suit and then the 501st, because I would truly be honored to be if I could hold it together and
Yeah.
actually do it, but I would truly be honored to go and volunteer at a children's hospital. Like that would be bucket list material. So I would be willing to go to great lengths to make that happen.
That's cool.
And doing, if those great lengths were creative measures, it would be an absolute pleasure. So I will do that, but in the meanwhile, I'm hooked on foam flinging as well. So here we are.
I have some friends who do the 501st thing, and I also saw a whole group. If you see Weird Al play, he sometimes closes with a couple of his Star Wars songs, and members of the 501st will just come out with him to like it's like a regular thing. Like if he's coming to town, they'll get in touch,
I
and
will
and
check that
and
out.
and, and like a group will just get on stage with him for his Star Wars songs. But yeah, they do really, really cool work. There's room for both. And well, so like what how did you get into cosplaying originally?
Well, in wanting to become a Mandalorian.
Just
Uh,
just for that.
yeah, basically, I
Yeah.
decided it was something I wanted to do, and I did. I learned to sew as a young child and hadn't in a very long time, but sort of knew that like I say, I've been a maker my whole life. I figure if I put my mind to it, I could, after a few tries or some trial and error and developing the skills, I could put together a cosplay worthy suit.
Mm,
Uh, so I got a sewing machine last October, but didn't start with the cosplay. I thought, well, let's start with some small projects so that I don't waste too much fabric. Let's start with some practical gear.
right.
And
And so
that's where things
that's
really
become
went
kind of a
crazy.
big yeah, that's become kind of a big thing for you in the
Yeah.
hobby, which
Yeah.
is
Well,
really, really cool.
and not just me. I want to give a shout out to the Scared Kickstarter, the our friends with Silver Fox and Containment Crew. They had that wonderfully successful Kickstarter, and
Mhm.
they're big thanks to them. There's going to be a lot of brightly colored tactical gear in the hands of what looks like a few hundred nerfers, I think.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, they have the same, I guess, sort of core morals that I do. My first outdoor event I went in black tack gear, and I felt very uncomfortable. And I knew right
Totally.
away that day I was like, we got to do something about this. So they've done their thing, and I'm really thrilled for that. And I've been really busy too, doing my custom commission work, and it's been pretty full time for me.
Yeah, when we had Ryan, Jesse, and Charles on, we were talking about I'm always like looking it's like the best you can do is sort of like maybe there's like a navy blue option or like tan.
Maybe,
Like
yeah,
that's the best
gray,
you can do, but it's all
yeah,
like dark and camo and like
yeah.
black and camo and like OD green or whatever, and it's just like come on. And there's no light colors that you can dye. Maybe there's a light gray that you can get to be like a purple or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, I'm really excited about Scared, and I feel like with folks like you making bespoke stuff as well, there's a really great. I I think there's really cool synergy between what they're doing and what you're doing because like if I can get the baseline pieces from Scared and come to someone like you for all the specialty bits that I want, that's pretty
Exactly.
sick.
I
Um,
agree completely.
Yeah. So I'm so glad I'm so glad that they're doing that because it can help sort of spawn. I hope this like robust because it's been a need for so long. It's been a need for so long. There are only so many of you who can like sew and are interested
Well,
enough in this stuff to like really match things together
yeah, and
for
I'm
really specific needs.
to be honest, I'm not sure of the Scared Kickstarter. I'm not sure who's doing the actual sewing, but I certainly do sew. I sew every day. It's become a real passion for me. But you're right, not a lot of people know how to do it anymore. And then it's really super niche because of the people that can sew, very, very few of them know how to and have the ability to sew heavy duty tactical type gear. And
Right.
of those few that can, typically they're doing it for real steel applications and they're not too
Right.
interested in foam flinging. So it's
Yeah.
like niche, niche, niche.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
What can I here's a question. What kind of sewing machine do you use to get
I
through
have
heavy duty stuff?
I have a few. They're all older than we are. My oldest machine is a 1955 360, and it
Okay.
weighs is probably about 50 pounds. So it's
Uh-huh.
considered semi-industrial.
Okay,
And then
so
yeah,
that's kind of where I want that's what I want to hear the rest of this. But
yeah.
so I have a FOF
Oh,
um
wonderful.
that we had a bunch of work done on it and then we traveled with it and I need to get it set back up again.
Yeah,
But I really want to get that going as my shop sewing machine. So I might need to bug you about setup questions at some point.
you
It
absolutely should.
might be the same model. I can't remember off the top of my head.
That that would be amazing.
Yeah.
If you have a FAF 360, you're pretty well set.
But what else are you running?
So that's my main machine. My kind of light duty machine is actually a mid 60s era Kenmore, which is sort of from that era, it's a basic domestic machine, but by
Mm,
today's domestic standards, it will be considered very heavy duty. But
mm.
ultimately, to be doing what I'm doing at the pace I'm doing it, I really need something like a Juki, a full industrial machine. But that's gonna set me back, $2,000 or $3,000. So I have to really decide I'm all in on this.
That's hard.
Yeah, and I mean, even the FAF, I got a great deal on that, and it was still several $100s, but
Yeah,
it's in pristine condition and works pretty well for what I need.
that's cool. I was lucky I inherited mine. Um, but yeah, we're big fans of specialized machinery here, so
Oh
that's
yeah.
really cool to hear about.
Man, I just disassembled a sewing machine not that long ago. So I just used it for parts. It was at the Goodwill outlet. It was beat up, cables are torn and stuff like that. And,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Oh,
know, and I,
it's one of those kinds of tools that's so ubiquitous. There's just so many roasted ones all over the
yeah.
place.
Well, what's
Yep.
nice is those old machines, there's just something about them. You know, everything was like cast aluminum. The solid
Yeah.
body was actually cast iron. Like a lot of the
Mm.
parts were casted iron, and I was really like tearing it apart. I was just so impressed by the parts and things like that. So yeah, I have such a huge respect for these old machines. They're a bit of beauty actually, because you just don't see stuff like that anymore.
Mm.
No, you don't.
Um,
And part of what I've done to kind of supplement my gig is actually I have a part-time job at my local fabric store, and they have sewing machines there that they're selling for $20,000, but
Oh my
it's
oh
god.
my
it's
God.
it's plastic and computers, and
Hmm.
I wouldn't be able to make gear on it, yet it's
Yeah,
worth more than my car.
that's so
So
funny.
it's yeah.
There was a sewing machine that I had really briefly that I sold to a friend who unfortunately passed away a little while later, but not due to the sewing machine, but um that was one of these ones that was controlled by a Game Boy Color. Have you ever seen this?
No, but
Um
that's
Oh my.
amazing.
it was a sewing machine that had
Oh,
it was a sewing machine and then there was a Game Boy Link port on the side.
I
And it
remember
comes with a
these.
Game Boy Color and a special cartridge and you could program your own stitches into it. And it would like it had a thing to follow the program that you put into it
Is it
and you
like an
could stitch.
embroidery machine then?
Well, so it was sort of like weirdly like in between, right?
Okay.
The
Where it
embroidery.
doesn't do like full embroidery, but as you're doing a linear stitch or you're arcing a stitch, it's stitching in the pattern. So you can actually tell it to do things like stitch lettering along a straight line.
I've only seen in like a video. I remember I was like scrolling on Instagram or something, and a video popped up of this thing, and I was like, oh my god, I forgot that this thing was even made. I didn't know you
Yeah.
actually had one at one point.
I did have one at one point. That was in California. I had it for a while because there was chiptune life. You just
Yeah.
kind of gather. If it has a Game Boy
Random
connected
gear.
to it, you just gather it at some point.
Right.
Or if it has an NES controller port or whatever, it just winds up in your bins. Um,
I feel
That sounds
that.
amazing.
yeah, we used it for a handful of projects. My wife would, like sew things onto the stitching on like a quilt. There's like hidden messages in the quilt, or like you come up with a really specific pattern that like matches the pattern of the fabric or something. It was really cool. It was a nice little detail thing, but obviously you're not building tack gear or like
Yeah.
sails on it, right? Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
doing
yeah.
little decorative stitches on it.
Yeah.
But it was a very cool machine for that kind of stuff. I love these. I think part of what's cool about your angle on the hobby, Mando, is that you're interested in all these different things and they all intersect in this way. That's what I love to kind of get at is how all these different hobbies that we do, people can find unique ways to connect them, because I think that there's a lot, like Merge Masters is really digging in on this specific style of modding that I think people should keep alive, that should still be going on. But also there's 3D printing. 3D printing is its own whole other hobby that
It sure
like
is.
99.99% of it has nothing to do with Nerf, but like we found ways to roll it in to what we're doing, and painting is a part of it, and sewing should be as much a part of it as any. I mean, sewing is definitely a part of it. Other people are sewing stuff for Nerf, but like, it's so great to like connect all of these things together and find those intersections between all the different things that we do.
That's super cool.
With that, let's move on to the first topic I wanna talk about a bit today.
Sure.
Walcom S7 just posted a teaser image. Have you seen this, Mando?
I have.
Yeah, it's just a photograph of his chronograph.
Freddy.
Right? That's right.
Yeah,
Freddy the chronograph.
Freddy the chronograph, yeah.
With I think it's like 273.8 FPS on the screen. And he essentially said, what if, how would you feel if you could get this kind of performance out of an off-the-shelf product? I have an NDA signed. This is from over a week ago, but I'm looking forward to being able to share this with you soon. So very, very open-ended. Who makes this product? Who knows? What does he mean by off the shelf? Who knows? Normally when we talk about that, one of the things that I said in the conversation about this is, we already had this conversation on this podcast when we were talking about the Nexus Pro X being 200 FPS and available off the shelf. And some of, when a product like that comes out, they send it to a few like influencer type people or like affiliate marketers and stuff.
Yep.
And the initial and they let those people write reviews and fill the reviews. And a lot of those people were getting this and giving it to their little kids. And so there were these reviews like, it seems really well built, but like I got a bruise from it. And it's like, okay, so you're giving it to people who like don't really know what this thing is for. And that's at 200 FPS. Beret asked this question in the Discord too. Do we really want there to be an off-the-shelf 300 FPS blaster? That's like, is that good for the hobby? Is that a good idea?
In my opinion, no. For me personally, I wouldn't really have a use for that. That would be a target blaster, and that's it. Like that's too hot for any of our games.
I mean, because there's a place for that. There's a place for that kind of power, for sure.
Yes, there is. Absolutely, there is.
Like I see people do amazing competitive stuff. I watch people set FPS records. What it's at like 510 right now or something. I think.
Yeah, it's low 500.
Yeah. Oof. And that stuff's amazing. I have no issue with high power play. I have no issue with high speed, high power play. But for people who maybe aren't prepared for that, I'm surprised that a retail company, I guess, would carry something like that. Although, you know,
I don't know with
it's
how vague this is. It's we don't know who's really
of
making it,
course,
obviously,
yeah.
and off the shelf. Like I it's such a vague term because off the shelf, it's not saying like it's necessarily you're going to a big box store because technically the MK4 from Dart Zone, which is essentially a like a Swift and can hit over
Mm-hmm.
300 FPS with a spring and the barrel add on to it,
Right.
is technically an off the shelf, but you have to order it from their website.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's an option because the whole point, I would say it's one of those things off the shelf. If you're going to go to say to a big box store, let's say you just go to a Target or Walmart or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
getting something that's 150 sort of, there's lower powered stuff, the typical things, Nerf things, and then rival offerings and or variants of it, obviously, and then you have these pro ones. So there's sort of a little mix there that introduces you from being, whether you're young like a junior line all the way up to 14 plus pro level blasters. And if you're really getting into it, then having that extra offering that's not on store shelves, that's on the website, because you start getting more and more into it. That is a great like stepping stone. You need that. But
Yes.
with how this is, I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical that it is something you're going to be able to buy off of the store shelf, like direct. I feel that it's probably going to be something that's like a online offering, again, sort of like the MK4. Just with how it's worded, it could be taken that way. Obviously, it's that NDA and just showing a number. It really leaves a lot to be a lot of questions open
No,
there.
I agree
So
with you. It's definitely not cut and dry that it's like a Walmart product necessarily,
yeah,
but at the same time, I could see something like this appearing in the sporting, like if it was separated in the sporting goods section. We keep sort of, there's already legal obstacles to
mhm.
hitting our hobby as is. Some of it is coming as sort of a side effect of issues with gel. Some of it is coming as a side effect of issues with airsoft. And some of it is just, I think the glimmers of recognition that, like, yeah, we have some pretty high powered product that, require some care and safety in their handling, and products that come with eye protection by default. And putting, if something like this were put on shelves and there isn't a clear distinction between the sporting goods side of our hobby and the toys side of our hobby, it seems like a little bit of a recipe for trouble.
Agree.
I'd agree with that totally. Yeah.
And I agree with what you were saying, Vile, earlier, but like off the shelf, I don't, I think more likely to see on a website. I think it's going to be off the shelf with an asterisk or some fine print.
Right.
And frankly, I'm in Canada, so I doubt I'd be able to even get it anyway.
Right.
You'd be
Right.
surprised how
Yeah.
little we could get, and the lengths I've gone to get some blasters. It's a little
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. That'll be an interesting thing. I mean, it'll be curious to see who this is from, whatever it is, right? Because we just saw Dart Zone expand significantly into the Australian market with their Kmart deal with the new versions of some of the Adventure Force blasters.
I'm calling it now. It's a Zen Wicking blaster. That's my guess.
Okay. What? Why? Why do you think that?
I don't know. Maybe just to be cheeky.
Maybe just that's fair. That's fair. No, that's good.
Well, yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Well, he says this level of performance for a price under anything else around it. Maybe it's the X shot longer shot.
Longer shot.
The longer shot. I love it.
The X shot, longest shot.
Yeah, it hits 273 feet per second, but you only get like 10 shots out of it before the plunger tube shatters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like we're more or less in agreement on this. I know that there's going to be a lot of discourse about this, and that's why, reasonably, that is why Walcom posts something like this. It's exciting to see big number, right? Like, and there again, it's not bad that people can buy blasters at this kind of power by any means.
No, and for everything I just said, I bought a Nexus Pro X. So hey, who am
yeah, I
Well, there's niche, like there's those clubs that are like that, right? Like we see, Dorian um in the Discord and
mhm,
running, 300 plus, close to 400 FPS blasters. But that club, that those FPS numbers are kind of needed for where they play and what they do. It's going to be a very niche product if
right.
it's like, if that's
yeah.
the FPS it comes with, because we all know from the Nexus as well, and certain blasters, like trying to tune them down is kind of pointless. They start to have really, really bad
Yeah, yeah. You're
inconsistencies.
better
And
off having a blaster that was designed to run at the
yeah,
FPS that you want. I uh
yeah.
I was also gonna say there's also New England Extreme Dart.
Hmm.
I'm building their rule book right now, and they are going those tournaments are going to be held on an airsoft field. And initially, I was told that there wouldn't be an FPS limit, but then I was told it would be 350. So, so
Yeah,
um,
yeah. But like
but
Bradley Phillips is another one as well, Australia,
yes,
and plays on an
yeah,
airsoft field. I think there's a sort of like, you were talking a little bit about airsoft bleeding over and even their own issues and legal stuff, but we're starting to see Nerf also bleed over into the airsoft fields because they can't really compete with the accuracy and the distance that these blasters can get.
right.
So you're starting to see people run these high powered, blasters in general on airsoft fields. So
Yeah, yeah.
maybe it's not necessarily for the typical Nerf war. Maybe it's more for those large wooded areas or airsoft fields.
I
Maybe
I
that's
think
more.
that's I think that's true. I think we're gonna have to wait and see what off the shelf really means, because part of
Yeah.
the danger, like, we know who the people are who totally should have access to this stuff. And I mean, that person is any person if they've spent long enough and like gotten into the right niche of the hobby where they're really going to get something out of having this kind of power, and they've learned, they've been hit with it, and they know, how to use it appropriately. There's definitely people who pop up in all the discords there's like kids who come in being like, what's the thing that's going to hurt my brother the most? And it's like, that's the
Yeah.
kid that I don't want to have access to
Yeah.
273 FPS for like $40 or whatever. So, we'll see what this is. It's, again, like you said, super, super vague at this point. But I think this conversation's worth having, even if this particular thing is actually like the Swift 2 or whatever, and it's like online exclusive. Um, the Nexus Pro X is a 200 FPS blaster, which is off the shelf at $50. Like, we're not that far away from this.
Hmm.
So I think this is a conversation that's worth having in our hobby at large, because the number creep is going to keep happening until I think that there's some kind of legal pushback.
This brings up an old conversation actually with the regulation change and how
Yeah,
there needs to be, with the regulations, there needs to be a section of it that is designed for foam flinging being part of the sporting goods. So that way we are no longer included on the toy market,
right.
and we are now
Yep.
included on a sporting good market. And that kind of brings up that old conversation again, and how we need to have people and somebody who's facing that sort of regulations and laws and rules
Right.
and
Or
like
or
testing methods and stuff. That was a big one.
or
So
realistically that we're both, right?
yeah.
Like, we still obviously want to have toys,
Yep.
cuz like, the average, like, if I'm going to Maryland Mayhem, I'm bringing both. I'm bringing some sporting goods stuff, and I'm also bringing some toy stuff for the HVZ. Um but just that, like, it's considered a toy under a certain cap,
Yep.
and everything above that
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
sporting good.
That's fair.
Jewels on impact, probably, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, is that they only certain countries use, say, like a impact rating, but like
Right.
here it's just more of is it bright? Does it have the bright, blaze
Mhm.
orange
Mhm.
tip kind of thing? And it's very kind of vague. And that's what we found when we looked at the regulations, and when we were having the discussions, we were like, yeah, we need to have something that is really there to explain to anybody, whether it's trying to get something for industry of here are the rules, here are the regulations you should follow. Here's the category that this would fall in. If it is too hot, it goes into the sporting goods. If it's below this particular one, it can stay in the toy aisle, kind of a thing. And yeah, I think it's these types of offerings are pushing that narrative more and more that we really need to, as a hobby, as people who are doing this, we need to start somehow getting ourselves out there to sort of be the voice and say, yep, we need to have, because it future proofs the hobby, both for everybody, those who are doing typical plinking office battles all the way up to full airsoft field, pro play kind of stuff. It just keeps everybody.
What was that materials ASTM? Is it ASTM that we were talking about? Maybe trying to get on the panel for. Maybe we should look at that. That seems like a meaningful way to spend some of the Ko-Fi money. Wouldn't you say?
We did talk. We were talking about potentially trying to be on there, and I personally would love to, because I think
it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I would love to be in that, because it's just being, especially in our position, we've been able to see quite a lot especially running this news show. Yeah. We've seen so much in the hobby coming from so many different places, in different arguments and different points of view, and it's really interesting to get it, because you can really take a lot of that with you to these to these things, and how they write it up and what they're supposed to do, and we even have people who work in industry who are in this hobby who can even also help with that type of stuff as well. Obviously, Blasterface was really a big key part of that, and letting us know about even that, actually.
Yes.
So yeah, I think this seeing something like this and the potential of it, again, just sort of reiterates we really should probably be doing that as a hobby to help future proof, again, the play from all the way from young kids all the way up to pro level adults.
Yeah, we need real industry representation for what is actually happening in our hobby, to support that kind of growth. That said, I mentioned our Ko-Fi. Speaking of that, one of the folks who support us by donating monthly to our Ko-Fi get the opportunity to ask our podcast guests a question. I'm gonna let's produce the show on the podcast for a second again. I'm realizing that if the Ko-Fi continues to grow, because we've had a couple recent additions, Emilio and Randall thank you for joining recently, and of course to our longtime supporters. We may need to grandfather in some of these folks and set a dollar limit for continuing to get podcast questions, because if we continue to grow at this rate, the whole podcast is going to be questions most of the time.
It could be.
That said, I was late asking for questions this time around, and so we just have one today. But it's a good one. That's very topical, I think, to the work that Mando is doing right now.
Well, let's have it.
Ghost Armory asks, what is the easiest, or I'm just going to say what is the easiest and the most difficult gear that you make to make, and why?
That's a great question. So interestingly enough, I don't know, maybe this would be common sense to most people, or maybe it wouldn't, but I find the hardest things to make in terms of sewing are actually the smallest things. Like trying to make a tiny little zippered pouch, even though it may use very little materials, like trying to get it around the tool and the tool around it. Definitely the smallest stuff is the hardest. For me, I would say the easiest things to make, or the things that come to me most instinctually, are holsters, whether they be for pistols or something a little larger like a shotgun scabbard. I would say the holsters come naturally to me, and I'm also very fortunate. I have some friends in both law enforcement and military, and so they've helped me with some designs, and so I would say that's the easiest for me. Aside from something super basic like a 2-point sling is very simple and basic, but for real gear, I would say holsters is the easiest, and anything really small is the hardest.
Is sewing something you ever do, just sort of sitting down with only like a vague idea and not really having like a a pattern or a plan, just like experimenting and just like putting
It,
things
well,
together?
it used to be, but not not these days. That like if I'm sewing for myself, or actually last night I took some time and I sewed a little tote handbag, like a shopping bag for Mrs. Mando. And so that was one where I was able to just kind of have a little bit more creative freedom, kind of let it go where it may, and as long as it turns out in the end, we're good. But lately, I've been
Mm.
really busy with commission work, and I'm really, really particular in that I want everyone to be happy. So sometimes I may even like bombard with questions like, "Here's all the options." Uh, I get really, really particular, and I just want to make sure everything's perfect. So I guess the answer is yes, but not anymore. Sorry if that's a little long-winded.
I got a question for you, actually.
Get it?
Since you since you make so much of this stuff, do you ever plan to make your own what am I thinking? It was the patterns for this, like a way to either sell the patterns, or because since you already kind of had a background of trying to get into cosplay, a lot of people in cosplay will design patterns for a
Yeah,
particular setup, and then they'll make a small book, or they'll have a file set to buy said patterns. Have you ever thought of
yeah.
doing that as well for some of the stuff that you're making for this hobby?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I've kind of gone back and forth on it. So to take it backwards one step, basically, anytime I'm making a holster or some type of pouch for something that doesn't already exist, i.e., every single Nerf blaster, I'm creating a pattern at that point. So anything I've
Right.
made a holster for, I have my own custom pattern for that is my own design that works in the way it works, and so on and so forth. And I'm kind of back and forth on that, because part of me thinks that that would be a nice way to share, to get them out there if there's other people that might have the equipment and the inspiration to want to try it. But then, part of me thinks maybe I should just keep the secret sauce to myself and keep doing what I'm doing because it's going fairly well. So, I'm kind of back and forth. Truth be told, the biggest challenge there is I do my patterns old school with pen and paper, and
Mm.
I mentioned earlier before we started recording, I'm not necessarily so technically inclined, and getting those things digitized is actually the biggest hurdle right now.
And
So if I
in a
could.
way that people would be able to replicate the scale.
Right. That it has to be able you have to be able to print it and it turn out perfectly. So from there you can cut it out and it will work.
Mm.
Or some type of scaling. Like I know when I've downloaded some patterns that come with like a little scaling tool. So you blow up the first page
Right.
until this thing's really 1 centimeter and then go from there. But that would have to be perfect. So that's been the biggest hurdle. And I think ultimately, yes, I will do it. I I've just like I say, I've been a little back and forth on it, but I guess I'm leaning towards yes.
It might be worth talking. We have a lot of like 3D printed blaster designers who do both selling assembled blasters and making their product available for free. Even someone like Silly Butts, who all of his stuff is available for free, all the files are available for
Yep,
free, but then
absolutely.
stores sell his hardware kits and he gets a cut of the hardware
Yeah,
kit sales. Um,
yeah,
so it might be worth checking in with some of those people and see kind of how it works out for them. Um,
yeah. It could also be too.
realistically,
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. Like a lot of people have bought 3D printers to make that stuff. I would love if you released a bunch of patterns and it incited a bunch of people to learn to sew. I think that's pretty sick. I think in the short term, you're still going to find yourself making a lot of stuff for for people.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the bottom
Sewing's
line
a
is
bit
how
of
many
a
people, yeah, how many people are really going to do it.
hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because the
think you're right.
investment to really get started is, I think I look at it because I'm friends with a lot of cosplayers, seamstresses and stuff like that as well. People who have done huge competitions and sewn their whole outfits from head to toe, and
Mhm.
that was sort of why I was curious, because for cosplays as well, certain things, even some of this tack gear or the holsters and things like that, while it's easy to buy, if you're doing competitions, you really do need to make your own. And
Yeah,
because when you're competing on some of those high levels, you like every bit that you can make yourself,
you
the
have
better. Yeah, you kind of have to. And in some cases, they will still maybe pick up a pattern because maybe the pattern for a holster is just really strange, or it's just something they're not really aware of, or they can't figure it out properly.
Right.
But if you have that, some people will still do it because maybe they're not doing the world championship, but maybe they're doing, MCM or something like that, which is a fairly big show, but um, these are still fairly competitive, and there might be a bunch of people doing a particular character that has a pistol of some kind, and they really want to try to get that holster down for this particular pistol, and it works really good with what you have. That's why I was trying to say, like, that to me seems like right up your alley of your patterns may very well work for people like that, because it might not even be people in this hobby. It might be more for people who are more in the cosplay side of things.
I think you're absolutely right. Actually, I think the cosplay scene may well be my best clientele, so to say.
Where are you? I mean, you're pretty much selling stuff like individual to individual right now, right?
At this point, yeah. It's basically done. I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it's at this point I've just been doing word of mouth through my Instagram, and that's been keeping me as a little busier than I can handle right now.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Who needs more? Who needs more then?
Well, that's just it. I don't want to let anybody down, so I'm just keeping it going as it is. But I'm also open to new things, and we'll see where this all goes.
Well, I've got a new thing for you right now because I think it's time for you to play our hobby trivia game.
Oh no! Oh.
Did we did we have a question from somebody who got last week's?
Did we? No, I didn't get that question. I reached out to them, and I never didn't hear back.
No.
Well, I have to say there may be a disappointed Ko-Fi subscriber coming up, and I will also point out, I've been a fan of the show since the beginning, and I have to say, if the trivia was still in the old format, I think I might do all right.
The old guess that blaster game.
Yeah, there was some old school stuff in there. It was right up my alley. But this new stuff, you got some challenging subjects.
Well, okay. First things first here.
Okay.
And we'll get to today's challenging subject. First things first is I have to do the random drawing, which I always forget to do before we start. So we have a segment on the show called KT scrolls around until he figures out where the list of people is. We have 22 people who signed up. Random.org, max 20. No, not 98. 22. Nope, that's not 22 either. There we go. Okay. We're going to generate a number. That number is 19. So we're just going to go to the bottom. 22, 21, 20, 19. Sam I Am Nerf. Regular around our server. Congratulations. You are the winner of this raffle. If Foam Mando is able to get 2 out of 3 trivia questions right, you will get a free question of our next podcast guest. What?
I will give it my all. I will do my very best.
Sam I Am, you will get, if that happens, you will get to ask a question of our next podcast guest, who is Mike, the head organizer of Pennsylvania Survival Fest. And that will be just after Survival Fest happens. It'll be the next episode. Survival Fest. If you're listening to this on release day, Survival Fest starts today. Or yesterday. Podcast is Saturday, I guess. I forget if they start Friday or Saturday. I think they're just Saturday, Sunday, aren't they? Because they don't have a comp.
I think so. I think it was only Saturday, Sunday.
Well, regardless, if you're traveling to PA Survival Fest, you're not relying on this podcast to know what day it starts. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. I hope. I hope you're not sitting at the airport going like, well, I'll just wait till the podcast tells me what day I need to be there. Anyway, Foam Mando, we have a game we'd like to play with you called Foam Mando. We have questions for you about the intersection of bread and the Nerf hobby.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for it. Bring on the bread.
Do you want to go first? Do you want to read like the first and third, and I'll read the second? Or
yeah, that'll work. We could do that. All right.
Yeah.
So, Which of the following is a real blaster that features bread as part of its molded shell design? Is it A, the Nerf Super Soaker Beef Boss, B, the Nerf rival Demeter, or
It's
is it what's that?
it's 1200. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh no,
The the rival naming
yeah.
thing where it's got
I
the
always just
numbers.
leave that off. I never, I
Yeah,
never
it's fine.
read
Whatever.
it. Or is it C, the Nerf Fortnite AR Der Burger?
Hmm. Well,
I can read
I'm
those
pretty
again if you want.
sure. Well, I'm pretty sure you made up B out of your head. So that tells me it's either A or C, or I'm completely wrong. Could you read them one more time for me, please?
Okay, so since
Thank you.
we'll go down it again, since we did get
Yep.
kind of interrupted between there. A, Nerf Super Soaker Beef Boss. B, Nerf rival Demeter. Or C, Nerf Fortnite AR Der Burger.
I'm going to go with A, the Nerf Super Soaker Beef Boss. Final answer.
That would be correct.
You people
Damn, all right.
always doubt
Woo.
yourselves, and
Always
then you
doubt.
like.
All right.
It's funny because I don't remember obviously the rival Demeter, and I think it's funny. KT puts in here the Demeter was the ancient Greek goddess of grains and food, among other things, but that was totally made up. And the AR Der Burger did come with stickers that depicted fast food and burgers, but the shell was just a normal Fortnite AR. The Beef Boss is a micro shots style super soaker that looks like the Fortnite character Beef Boss, who has a burger for a head.
Excellent. I did not know that, but now I do.
And you took a lucky guess and got it
You
right.
got
it's
it.
fine.
Absolutely.
As far as I know, it's the only. I didn't want to commit to saying this, but I'm fairly confident it's the only shell design that depicts bread of any blaster. I could not find.
I can't think of any
else.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next
All
up.
right. Good start. Good start.
Yep. You're already one up. All right. Nerf does not often venture into the realm of food production, but they have made pet food, specifically the refills for the Nerf Dog Treat Blaster. Although they're chicken flavored, what kind of flour is used for the base of this edible ammo? Is it A, corn flour, B, rice flour, or C, almond flour?
I'm going to go with A, corn flour. Final answer.
All right. You are incorrect. And I'll tell you, corn is not good for dogs. Almond flour would be way too expensive. Rice flour is very often used as a binding agent in dog food. So it's all right. It's like the treat discs that the thing launches are basically all rice. It's just a hard rice patty that you're shooting out of a. Have you played with one of these things, by the way? They're like the cheapest. Those little disc launchers that are just like it uses a. I just read that Out of Darts article about springs, and so I should know what the spring type is called.
Torsion
but where there's
spring?
two little. Yeah. It's just a torsion spring that clicks back and flicks this thing out of the thing, and they shoot like 3 feet. Anyway, whatever.
I
They're
had
really
one of the
stupid.
off-brand ones, and it was just utter garbage. I don't even
They're
remember
so
how
bad.
I got it. I just remember tearing it apart and then just throwing it away.
Yeah, I have a couple of them somewhere.
I've never used one, but does this mean it's too late to change my answer?
Yes. But it's okay because you have a third opportunity.
I will
You have a
take the third
opportunity.
opportunity.
All right, here we go.
All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Because this is your final chance to get this. So
This is it.
you'll have to think it through. Okay. YouTuber Legit Bread has been making Nerf content for 7 years. But it took him a few videos before he hit on foam flinging as a formula for success. What other hobby is featured in 3 out of 4 of his currently available pre-Nerf videos? Is it A, scuba diving, B, cosplay, or C, arcade claw machines?
Oh God. What are you doing to me? So should I just randomly guess?
Well, think about it a little bit. Think about it a little
okay.
bit.
Think about it
Are
a
you
little bit.
familiar with Legit Bread's content? You watch this channel?
Loosely.
Loosely, yeah.
Probably not as familiar as I should be.
It was I mean, you know, obviously Nerf very toy heavy, so.
Can I hear the options again?
Yes, absolutely. A,
Thank you.
scuba diving. B, cosplay. Or C, arcade claw machines.
Arcade claw machines.
That's your final answer?
I guess it is.
You would be correct.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Legit Bread's earliest available video is a Hawaii travel vlog, and his first Adobe Premiere production, according to the description, it includes scuba diving, but also a brief appearance of an arcade claw machine. After a Nerf Melee battle video, his final two non-Nerf videos would be claw machine videos before his review of the Modulus Tri-Strike, which currently stands at 26,000 views.
Well, that's an impressive view count, and I'm really glad I got that right. I did not want to let Sam I Am down.
All right. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you
See,
so
now
much.
you narrowed it down. You got there. Sam I Am, I'll be in touch. Looking for a question for Mike for the next episode. And the train continues. The trivia train continues. That was a good one. That was really fun. How do you feel? How are you feeling after that? How you feeling?
A little relieved. I feel relieved. You know, I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself here. You know, I feel it's important for the community for me to be successful in this venture. So, you know, I took it pretty seriously. But unfortunately for this type of event, there's really no way to pre-train. You know,
it's very true.
It's not like I can do my prep work or my homework. You know, so I feel
there is something in all the trivia games. And if you've ever noticed, KT is really good about kind of trying to leave hints somewhere in all of it. It's one of those things. A lot of times, if you've gone through the first question, second question, by that point, you'll start to kind of see sort of something within there. Like you'll have to, it's just a process of elimination at the end of the day. Like it is really just that. And it's really funny watching, because I Beret will always be the best, not realizing the fact that all of the answers were the same letter on each and every one of them.
Well, and specifically, it was all B because all of his names that he uses start with B.
Right.
Yeah.
So they were all B.
Yeah, there was a hidden little thing in there in each and every one. But that's information for anybody who's listening who may also partake in one of the trivia games. You know, just dropping that bit of knowledge on people.
I'm always trying to. The goal is for the trivia game to be won. That is the goal. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about a website that is kind of near and dear to my heart in some ways. Etsy.com. So, I think, did I mention this on the podcast before? Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. When Etsy was pretty new, I want to say in like 2009, they launched in like 2005. I used to refurbish rotary telephones and resell them on Etsy. It's like a side hustle of mine. I did that for a little while, sold a decent number of them, and then I had a couple shipping fiascos and kind of gave up on it.
I feel like you did mention this before. This sounds familiar.
Yeah, it has been mentioned before.
Yeah. And at the time,
happy to hear it again.
Well, so, but what I didn't really talk about was like, the vibe on that website at the time. I often felt like I was like really going out and sort of connecting with an artisan who was willing to like make custom things and like modify orders, and um people would add cute stuff to your package, and like you felt good if you were paying more than you would pay for something off the shelf. You felt good about it because you knew you were engaging with an artist on the other side
Like a maker and
of the
crafter
website.
type of
It's
place. Yeah.
and they really like that was their whole thing, was that things had to be handmade, and they'd actually sometimes they'd be sort of like hard about enforcement of this. um I knew people who had to like justify that their stuff was like handmade, and they accepted those justifications generally, but like you'd have to go through this process every now and then. It had to be that, or it had to be vintage. And there was like a relatively strict definition of vintage. It had to be X years old at least. Um, and you could also sell supplies to a certain degree, but there was still like a limitation on like you couldn't just be like a large warehouse selling supplies. You still had to be like, yeah, like I resell beads, but I like hand pick them or something like that. Um, I guess what I'm trying to say is I have a very distinct memory of Etsy's early vibe. And by this point in time, we have a handful of larger are sort of like major hobby retailers, which, as we said when Luke was on, and when Charles and Jesse and Ryan were on, crazy that we have that for a hobby our size. And we're growing for sure. This is a growing hobby, I believe, but like the fact that we have like, just off the top of my head, Out of Darts, Containment Crew, Silver Fox, um uh there's other ones anyway that are just dedicated to our weird stuff. Crazy. um but with a few outliers, a lot of the people underneath that level that aren't necessarily big enough to support their own stores are on Etsy. And this week, we found out that Captain Slug, who recently sort of returned to producing stuff, is leaving Etsy because the fee structure doesn't make sense for a store of his size. Last episode or the episode before that, we reported on AK Blaster Mod, who is sort of like a medium-sized company.
Definitely.
They closed their Etsy shop for similar reasons, but also because they were hitting rule changes about imitation firearms. And I mean, AK Blaster Mod stuff, they tend to carry things that lean a little bit more in that direction, but they also, a lot of what they sold was like parts, and Etsy has an explicit rule against firearm parts. So that may be why they got hit. But also as a result of that, I think for similar reasons, Out of Darts took most of their stuff off their site.
Mm-hmm.
And so off their Etsy page, which was always sort of secondary to their website, obviously. But does Etsy? I mean, Slug started his own web store, which I think when Slug started was not really an easy thing to do, but now it's a lot easier. So, and we still have sort of a few people who are successful on Etsy. Foamdemic runs her business entirely on Etsy. But I know that she also is constantly dealing with like people gaming the complaint system against her, or like doing weird stuff. Or if you have any kind of production delay, it turns into a big nightmare. So like, does Etsy serve the needs of our hobby anymore? I know, Mando, you were talking about how you're sort of explicitly leaning away from maybe opening an Etsy shop.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I talked earlier about how I don't really have any immediate plans to, bring my platform to a digital space, but I know eventually I'm going to have to. Things are going to slow down to a point where I'm going to want to expand online. But the more I see and the more I hear, the less I think it's going to be Etsy, and the more I think it may be, something else, maybe Shopify or a different platform. But seeing all these creators I respect jumping ship, doesn't make me necessarily want to jump on board.
Right. Yeah. I know that the other thing that's really frustrating about Etsy, has anyone tried to search for anything on Etsy lately?
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
It's, it's like I search for something with a specific username, with a specific store name on it, and it shows you a million unrelated things. And it's like, I was extremely clear about what I was looking for. I was
Mhm.
very clear and very specific, and I named what it was, and yet you're showing me all this unrelated stuff.
I
And it's
typically use Google to search Etsy.
right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I get better results.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
absolutely. And like, I don't understand how that benefits Etsy. Like, are they showing me things that Etsy also used? So, Etsy used to have this thing where you would post a listing and you would, what did they call it? Did they call it boosting? Or like, there was like or like renewing. You had to like set a budget for like renewing your listings because there was some aspect of the search function that was chronological. And so it's so weird. You would have to like pay to like boost your listings to make sure they were appearing near the top of search results.
Oh, this is like Google. So Google has that as well. That's how people are like, you see they have to label it obviously, but you'll see like the first 3 or 4 results to certain things will say
Yeah,
sponsored on it, and
are the
that's because they
sponsored
paid.
links.
Yeah, they paid to be in those positions. Um yeah, that sounds like a recurring, sort of pay to win type of
Yeah.
thing.
Definitely.
Ew, that feels icky.
Well, and I mean, that was the old way. I don't know if it works that way anymore, but I do know, you can like pay to have your listings appear in things more often, but if they appear in external ads, they take and like someone clicks on that external ad and then makes a purchase, they take a bigger cut of your revenue. I just don't see how with that payment model, I can see why Slug is leaving, because I don't see how with that payment model a a hobby shop that serves a hobby of our size can really be viable. I guess if you're a store, Domachevsky was talking about this too. I think part of the reason Domachevsky is able to survive on there, one, because he's international relative to a lot of his customers. He doesn't have a lot of options.
Mhm.
But also his products are relatively expensive. So maybe the cut that Etsy takes is a little easier to swallow just because the overall dollar amount is a little higher. I think that might be true for Foam Demic as well. But I don't know. What do you think? What is next? Like where else can our hobby go?
I mean, I remember Etsy was sort of like the old argument I remember was you are going to cast such a wider net by putting it on Etsy because every other place is just not viable. And I think that a lot of people are kind of getting pushed out with these payment models. And even I've seen complaints as well where if you go to Etsy, sort of like in that, you're talking about the search function, um, you're getting you're basically finding the same stuff you find on Amazon and eBay. It's
Yeah.
these sort of like, drop ship shops basically just pumping and dumping a bunch of whatever product, and it could be literally anything. It could be hardware, it could be just, screws and stuff that you could literally find on, again, eBay or Amazon. And eBay was like that too for the longest time. I've been on eBay since 1998. And back in the day, it was literally just people selling their stuff. And now you go on there and it's all these, drop ship Chinese manufacturer. Like if you do a search for any item, you're going to get 1,000 items that are going to be shipped to you from China. and maybe 3 people who are selling it that are like, in the States. And it's
You have I don't do
you know.
any search on eBay without turning on the like used filter
Mhm.
and the location filter and like you
Yeah, there's
in order to
right,
find
and
anything
that's the
interesting.
thing. Etsy's sort of turning, like slowly turning that way as well, which is, again, you're just getting drowned out by that point. And I think that there's at least within the hobby, people are starting to know of a lot of shops. So if people do go to things like Shopify, or if they open their own shop, like most, if you're going to get something from Silver Fox, you know where to go. You're going to go to Silver Fox website, or if you go, if even if say like Jade, if Jade opened up a shop like that as well,
Jade of Foam Demic for anyone.
right? Jade Foam Demic was to open up that shop as well. I think people would start to find that way over there, because if that whole shop shuts down off of Etsy, while it does take away a pretty large portion of it, it was sort of like what Out of Darts did, right? Like Luke was originally started over there, was probably making quite a lot of sales before on Etsy for a long time, before the website really became sort of a household name within the
Right.
hobby. And then people migrated over to the website because, why bother going to Etsy when I could just go to the website? And I think
Yeah.
that's sort of the natural progression, is once you get to a certain point, you kind of have to move over. I think it's difficult for shops that are small, or those people who are selling, onesie twosies of little things. That's a really difficult spot to be in, because trying to really get known, whether it's through selling it on Etsy or doing your own advertisement, which is a whole, time, it's such time consuming stuff to do. Like you were talking, Domo has a whole website dedicated to what he does.
Right.
And even though, like, you can go to a lot of the stuff on there, you can see the background, you can see the storylines, you can see, get the installation, or like the guides to actually build everything. A lot of the stuff to actually buy it still takes you and redirects you back over to Etsy at the end of the day. But then Etsy also, he has listings there that push you back over to his site. So it's sort of a back and forth between that, and he's sort of built that sort of, symbiotic sort of like connection between these two different sites, almost like they are almost intertwined in how he did it. It's just not always going to be feasible for every person and every creator that's out there, and we have so many of them now as well, because like you said, we had Slug, you now have Silly Butts, you now have all these different creators that have stuff that they could technically go and sell. And it's like, really, there's so many different options. And Etsy, while it was kind of king for a long time, I think it's sort of devolving at this point. It's really becoming not as viable as it used to be. Again, just between getting buried, the cost of trying to run a shop there. I looked at using Etsy at one point as well for files, because I do a lot of 3D
Right.
modeling. And I when I looked at the amount that they charged for a lot of this for their fees, I just said, this is ridiculous. And I just looked at it, I was like, well, I'll just go over to one of these. I can't even remember which one it was.
Well, Printables now has
Yeah.
a really robust, apparently, setup for selling files for 3D printing, which is
Well,
great that exists as an option.
yeah, there's been a lot of pop-ups. Well, there were other ones before that. I think it was My Mini Factory was one as
Right.
well. And the thing about sites like that, especially for those of us who do 3D modeling, they're great because you can not only add some free models for people, so that sort of might introduce them to your sort of page and your listings, but then they can start seeing the paid ones that might be like a full blaster design or a whatever, and then you have these free parts that maybe change something else on it or add like a cool site or do whatever.
Yeah.
Those are now becoming more and more viable options for people. And it seems even on our news, I've noticed that so many people are using printables now, and it just seems like we're constantly directing people there. It's like, there's still a few that we go to Etsy shops and Etsy listings, but then I'm starting to see other things that are directing them elsewhere. And it's like, maybe that's the thing, right? Like Mando said, if you see a lot of people starting to jump ship, there's no point in you trying to get on. So
Yeah, and hey, maybe I can get sewing patterns on printables, printed in 2D. I
actually,
mean, maybe.
I'm pretty sure you can. There's a lot of stuff I've seen people do for both like woodworking. So there's
Mhm.
carpentry style designs on there and other things. I wouldn't be surprised if you could actually.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
That's a cool option. Wonder.
That was a thing on Thingiverse for a long time, but obviously Thingiverse never had the paid side of it where you could sell files. But that's where I think places like Printables are kind of doing it correct because
Right.
it helps you as a nice repository of both free and paid models.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I
What?
think I think for patterns, that's probably what I'd be interested in, and the fee or the price I'd want to charge for a pattern would be low enough that getting into those Etsy fees that would make it prohibitive.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Where it's like you're not really seeing anything as a result. Um, it's funny you made the eBay comparison too earlier. I that was another part of sort of early Etsy culture was it really was like eBay versus Etsy in the hearts and minds of users.
I remember
Um,
that.
Yeah, I sold some
yeah,
of the old Game Boys on eBay back in the day.
right.
So yeah,
Oh
I
my God,
know.
that's right. Chiptune had the same thing.
Yes, it did. Yeah, we've
God.
seen this in different ways throughout, and it's changed every single time. Where the site that used to be really good, you started to have to play these games to be able to
Yeah.
keep yours at the top of the list, keep it competitive. People start pricing down compared to you, which makes it almost not worth it. The because basically at the end of the day, between your parts and fees, it became pointless. And then
Right.
you started to get completely drowned out by
Ugh,
all these drop ship type of stuff that just completely floods the category that you're in. I love seeing car parts when I'm looking up Game Boys, like
yeah, right.
it was you start seeing stuff like that and it was the same like that happened on eBay and then obviously again you start moving on to different sites, but each of those sites while they were great at one point, they just slowly degrade into the same, unfortunate system like that.
Etsy not a little while back they bought Reverb, which is as a
Hmm.
musician, it was a music specific site focused on used gear. There was some new gear on there, but not in the same way. It was not offensive in the way that like drop shippers on Etsy were, sort of like a violation of the culture. Reverb is still very much like, there's enough people offering the new ones, sometimes at a good deal, but you still get to see the used stuff really clearly. Like it was fine. But like, even that site has started to change now that Etsy owns it, and still feels like they're locked in this. One of the things that both Etsy and eBay have done is you have to like click 3 times to read the description of the thing. And it's like, that is the thing I want the most. What did the creator say about it? I want to know what this thing is about. And they hide the descriptions when you click on a listing for the first time. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, they want to
That's
put
annoying.
either recommended stuff at the top or they want to show you reviews of the shop first. And it's like,
Yes.
I would rather read the item.
Yeah.
Let me know what
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at.
They want you to buy it without understanding what it is. And it's like, that can't benefit anybody.
Well,
That
it's
has to
also
lead to people buying things they don't understand.
it's also again like you were stating earlier, people gamifying the review system. And because again, if it puts the reviews at the very top of the listing, you don't even get a chance to see the description of the item. The first thing you see is whether somebody rated it high or low, and that means that as a seller, you might have to bend over backwards for just to try to keep those reviews, positive.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds
Ugh.
fun to deal with.
Yeah,
It's
I don't like it. I don't like this at
no,
all.
it's bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we agree that the Etsy's time has come probably in our hobby, but I don't know what's going to replace it. And I think there's going to be plenty of people who don't really have a better option, even though
Hmm.
it's getting worse. Like we were saying,
I
Domachevsky is kind of selling internationally, kind of limited.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, the big name I hear thrown around otherwise is Shopify, but now that you guys have mentioned printables, I mean, that's a household name within the hobby as well. So I think that might be a
I mean
solid option.
that'll take care of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like print, a lot of people in our hobby are selling the concepts of objects, not the objects
yeah,
themselves.
exactly.
And they can really handle that. And like I said, we're lucky to have some larger stores that are big enough to license products and like stock things that smaller makers are making. Um uh or take designs on and license them and print them in house. Uh all of the major shops I think that we have do that at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
well, um I want to chat about one more big thing today. And I have a big prediction that I want to make. And so uh I- I've been seeing some puzzle pieces sort of float around, and I have a theory about where it's all going. I don't think it's related to the Walcom teaser. I think that that's a separate thing. But this specifically has to do with Hasbro and with Nerf. So one thing that popped up today, just today, Wednesday the 29th, was a bunch of influencers, from our hobby. First, we saw Drac, and then we saw Maritime Foam, Anthony, who's been on the podcast and has guest hosted with us before. And then after that, Ri-Fi, who even he's one of the bigger Nerf influencers, but I think in the hobby he's a little less well known because he definitely speaks more to a general audience.
Yeah.
And as well as what was the one that just popped up? Foam from Above.
Yeah.
Foam from Above was there. All made it to the Hasbro headquarters.
Yep.
I have confirmation from Maritime Foam that they did sign an NDA. So whatever they were there to see is something that Nerf is not prepared to release to the public yet.
Okay.
So there's something, right? Hasbro has something that's intended for our market. And when I say our market, I don't necessarily mean the hobbyist market. I just mean nerfy stuff in general. So like in theory, with just that information, it could be the next Pro Blaster. It could be that they're just getting to see the N1 stuff, the N series stuff early. It could be it could be anything. It could literally be anything, right? Here's the thing though. We also just saw, we've been watching the way that like the N1 Dart and the N series stuff has been coming out. And it was like, we got sort of our normal leak thing, which is like some international sites post some of them too early, and somebody, and it's probably utter travesty or general strife, finds it and brings it to
Yes.
us.
Yes.
And great work, y'all, by the way. Great work. Keep it up. Or Bigfoot. Bigfoot's been finding a lot lately. But we get these hints of what it is. We get descriptions. We get translated descriptions. Eventually, we get like a picture. Nerf actually responded for the first time once to like, all the influencers popped up and started posting videos about the N series stuff. We've made video about it, and Nerf like made a little teaser video, kind of showing the like blueprint versions of it. That's unusual, I think, for Nerf to even react to stuff like that. This happens all the time. We're leaking stuff like every other episode, from one of the major brands. It's unusual for Hasbro, I think, to respond in that way. I think that indicates that this is bigger to them in some way. Like they really do want to make an effort to control the narrative around the release of this product. The big piece of this to me is something that General Strife just found, which is going to be in this episode, which is which was found on a Czech website. It's like a tech-centered e-commerce site. And so it feels kind of like you go to the Best Buy and there's like 3 Nerf blasters in the back in the toy aisle. Feels kind of like that. But what it is it's a new version of the Minecraft Pillager's crossbow. And it looks like they used the same plastic top, but they actually made it multicolored this time. You're welcome for that idea, Hasbro. I was the one that painted mine. You enjoy. But instead of having the 3-shot AR, smart AR, it has a 6-round cylinder that shoots N1 darts. This to me is really, really big. And the reason it's really, really big is if you think about their other, like a lot of people have been looking at the N1 dart. It's made of a different foam. It has a short head. It has the little stubby thing like an Ultra Dart. People are comparing it to the Ultra Dart. But the thing about the Ultra Dart is it only existed in Ultra blasters. It was its own line. It was a different world, away from the Elite Dart, away from the Mega Dart, which Mega is a subset of Elite in their like pantheon of darts. Ultra was its own world. It was only fired out of Ultra blasters. They had their own style and their own look. It was its own sub-series. For the N1 dart to be getting licensed products, I think is a big shift. Based on that, the fact that we're almost immediately seeing leaks of a licensed product with the N1 dart, the fact that they're trying to control the narrative around the release and the announcement of this dart, the fact that there's a bunch of influencers at Hasbro headquarters being shown something right around now and we don't know what it is. I have a theory that Nerf is preparing to abandon the Elite Dart in favor of the N1 Dart.
I would agree with that. I'd 100% agree with that.
Well, I don't know what to say. I in a way, I hope that's not true, but I can't disagree with what you're saying, KT.
I would agree with this on the fact that at the end of the day, the selling of the darts is more profitable than even the selling of the blasters. Like, period. It really is. That is where their money is at. And if you even look at the influencers, all influencers will tell you buy anything else. Period.
That's also
well,
go out and get
I think
waffles.
that they realize. I think they realize that they've lost control over the 50 cal dart.
Yes.
Like that was their thing. Streamlines, elites, people started cutting them into half lengths, and then other people made better versions of the dart, and they're stuck in this spot where part of their brand is tied to the specific form of the Elite Dart, but that form is functionally bad for what the dart is supposed to do. And so for them to break out of that, they can't just make their own waffle head. Then they're following Dart Zone, and they're following now the X-Shot and Busby. They all have waffle heads that all work better than Elite darts to varying degrees, just in terms of a full-length dart. So I feel like this is their attempt to create a whole new dart type and sort of reboot in a way that's separate from the existing ecosystem.
I think it's also a push because the one thing that was different about this dart that it shares a similarity with the Ultra was that nub on the back, and that nub was supposed to be a security lock. It's to prevent you from using other things. Like they people have talked about it like, oh, it's supposed to interact with this thing. It's like making sure that a mag is it's a Nerf mag is inserted before it actually does it. It basically engages like a safety lock kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if they create this, that even if it's a 50 cal, there's speculations on size and it's like 3/4 length. It's this. And sure, all of those may be correct. But if they do decide to keep it in the 50 cal size, that nub and the potential of all of these blasters and how they function and how that little nub is going to work, because the fact that this is a revolver on the Minecraft one also means that it has an AR system. And they might have something where that nub is actually engaging the AR and not the actual the outside of the dart. And if that's the case, that nub is exactly where all other darts have a hole.
Right.
And that could be their way to try to completely prevent all competitor darts from being used. Period.
Yeah,
And
that would
they
work.
could hold that entire market for a very long time,
Yeah.
while, between patents and, third parties and all that, trying to even the Chinese third parties that might try to make a fake, like little Valentine or whatever type dart.
Mm.
It prevents them from being able to make anything for quite some time. And they can really clamp down on other companies like Amazon or anything like that from selling those for quite a while too. Um,
Well, I mean, that's the
I
big
believe
question,
it.
right? Like, how much of a gamble is this for them? How much of a sure thing is this for them? I don't know. Um, it's a like, it's a huge shift if this is what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, it's a really big deal. Like, they built this ecosystem, and I think they believe they have the clout and the power to abandon it just as easily.
I mean, the Ultra One could have been sort of the trial to see how it works, see how the system worked, see how the foam, even because maybe the foam that they were using, it's everything's always a bit of a trial and error to see what sticks and what doesn't. Because obviously we saw
Yeah.
Vortex didn't stick around that long, and there was only a handful of blasters for that. And while it's like a fun, like fan favorite kind of a thing, it's not really viable for most things out there. But with this, I am curious. I am personally curious about the dart. I'm curious about the foam, and I'm curious about the length of it, because because we always look at it like, oh, there's a difference in aerodynamics and the weight and things like that as well, because you want the weight to be all at the front of the dart. If this is actually solid foam all the way through, how does that affect the weight distribution? It I'm curious what the dart's going to perform like, and especially once you put some real power behind it, because we saw people who put a little bit more extra power behind the ultra darts, and all of a sudden they were actually doing what they were claiming on the boxes originally.
Right.
We
Right.
we saw that, oh no, they're very accurate. Oh, actually they're really good if you give them like a 20 or 30% power boost behind them. All of a sudden they actually are doing what they kind of claim on the box, and it's like, yeah. So I really am curious on the dart itself. What does it do? Is it going to be a shift that's big enough? Because there's still people who run full lengths, right? Like a lot of people who are flywheeler primaries still run full lengths. It's not off the shelf anymore. Like it's not something you don't see. That's still very common, especially like HVZs and stuff like that. You'll see both half darts and full lengths pretty regularly. But
Yeah.
I am very curious how this is going to take and kind of shake things up. Um, but it's always going to be if the dart works, because the problem with Nerf's original elite darts was they had to have that one particular head on it that had Nerf embossed on it, and it had to
Right.
have like their specific one, and they could never have any change. And the only time they did was the AccuStrike, and they didn't even stick with that for very long for whatever reason, and I'm still not sure. And we saw the half length versions of those with the Strife
I
X,
was gonna
but
say, what do we think this might mean for Nerf Pro?
that I'm not sure. And that is the problem with so many NDAs, because obviously the creators that were behind, who were part of the hobby, that were behind the Strife X, it were they behind the creation of the dart? Who was? I'm sure Buff Daddy might have that that patent for these particular darts somewhere, and it
Mm.
has the name, but it might not have the person who actually did all the R&D behind it.
Yeah.
But maybe that is something where they actually put some actual R&D behind it, and they're actually creating a better dart. That's the most like optimistic outlook, obviously. But we'll just have to wait and see. I am curious. I am curious enough that the moment it comes out, even if I don't buy a blaster, I am willing to just buy the ammo type just to mess with it,
Oh
because I
yeah,
am
I
very
want to mess with
curious.
it.
Yeah,
I want to
I'm
know
very,
about it,
very curious.
but it's hard to.
I know there's a lot of people have been talking about the bullpup and how it looks like it'd be pretty easy to get to short darts, and that's something I'd be interested in.
Yeah. I, I Yeah, it's hard because, half darts, we're so comfortable with them now, and we finally sort of have reliable access to them to whatever degree. I mean, I know there's all these stories at Maryland Mayhem of Magic Smoke, King of Games, measuring every single dart in a pack of of worker darts just to get enough, and then finally getting a bunch of bamboos and having to do a lot less measuring. And it's just like you just never know. Slight shifts in manufacturing make a difference at that point.
Yeah.
And so the idea of a whole new dart type coming out and having to buy it at retail price, and like, even if it performs better, even if somehow it performs better than the average half dart at high power, it's not going to be viable until there's options for getting them.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be tough, but then at the same time, if you're correct in your theory and that Nerf's going to drop the elite dart, well, then if it's your only option, then it's a lot more likely to saturate the market, it seems.
Well, but I think in that situation, we're still going to see Dart Zone, Worker, X Shot. They're all making half darts currently. I don't think they're going to stop just because Nerf starts making a new dart.
No, and like you said, I think the full length community is still very much out there and present. I know
Yeah.
in our club and our games, we use a lot of Adventure Force waffles.
Absolutely. That was my whole jam at UMBC. I was running a stock Thunderbolt, and I was not the only one. Works great in those settings.
Yeah.
But I mean, I theoretically, if I could afford the darts, I could be running a what's it called? What's the bullpup called?
Sprinter.
Sprinter. That sounds right.
The new, I'm looking at it's the N series Sprinter.
I don't know, man. There's so many.
Yeah.
There's just so many blasters. I can't keep track of them anymore. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. That's my theory. That's my theory. I think it's solid enough.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something.
Yeah. Well, listeners, folks, let me know what you think. Hit us in the YouTube comments or the. I wish the podcast platforms had a better. Maybe I don't wish the podcast platforms had a better comment structure. I don't know. I feel like I wish they did. But I know, like, everyone, like, podcasts are always like, leave us a review. I have never found the place on Apple Podcasts where you leave reviews. I've never been able to do it. I don't understand how it works. I'm pretty tech savvy. I've never seen it. I don't know where it is. You can't do it from the app for sure. So I don't know. If there's somewhere to leave us a review, I guess leave us a review. It's good for engagement, but for sure, yeah, I want to know what people think about that prediction. Heck, maybe by the time this comes out, we have news about it, and this whole discussion is silly. I have no idea.
You never know.
It's entirely possible. But what I do know is that it was great having you on the podcast and getting to chat, Foam Mando. Will you please tell the folks if they want some custom, bespoke, handmade, boutique tactical gear, or just want to see some cool cosplay stuff, where can they find you?
Well, check me out. I'm Foam Mando on Instagram, and I'm Foam Mando Canada on YouTube. So feel free to check me out. And also to anyone listening, let's go ahead and leave a 5-star review for the Foam News Collective podcast on Apple Podcasts. Find a way to make it happen, people. Let's do this. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. It's been a real pleasure. Like we said in the beginning, it sort of almost feels like a continuation of Maryland for us, because we all got to hang out and spend a fair bit of time together, and that was really such a blast for me. It was really one of the best weekends of my life, quite frankly. So I'm really, really happy to be here.
It's great to get to hang out with you, even if virtually. We'll get to make it to another event at the same time.
One day we will.
It'll
Absolutely.
It'll happen.
Well, I'm certainly hoping to go next year. And I shouldn't say hoping. I'm planning on going back to Maryland next year, and I'm planning on bringing some friends too. Do I have time to? Can I give a quick shout out here before we wrap up?
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to say that if not for these people, there wouldn't even be a Foam Mando. But first and foremost, my wonderful wife, Mrs. Mando, is truly my better half. And my good friends Maritime Foam and Jexstar Foam Jacal. Without them, there definitely would be no Maritime Foam, or sorry, no Foam Mando. And
That's
also
also
my good
true.
friend Not Enough Nerf. Not Enough Nerf and I we've been in contact for almost a year, but we met in person at Maryland, and since then we've been talking several times a week, and just are building a really wonderful friendship. So shout out to Not Enough as well.
That's great. You're just shouting out the fam here.
Yeah, I know,
You got
right?
you
Yeah,
got
exactly.
some of our favorite, some great guests that we've had on the show
Absolutely.
already. Just great
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Just
Wonderful
great people.
people.
I mean, we're lucky in this most of this hobby is great people. I think we're really kind of lucky that I think every hobby has people who have things to learn, but I think that this hobby has a decent record of uplifting good deeds and good people. And I love that about it a lot.
Yeah, you're absolutely
Um,
right.
yeah.
The blasters are fun, and we all like to go out and play with toys, but the people are what really make this hobby.
Mm-hmm. And all the toxic people go play airsoft.
Yeah.
Um, kind of self-solving problem.
There you
Well,
go.
with that, Vile, you streaming this week?
Oh yeah, I will. If it's on release day, I am probably. Actually, I've got another integration that I pulled up. It was an older one, and it's a. Speaking of Vortex, it's a Vortex blaster. Come watch me do a Vortex integration mod on
Ooh,
Twitch.
that's fun.
TV/Vile_mods.
Links to all that and Mando stuff down in the description. I've teased my band's album coming out soon. It's closer, but I don't have a date yet. But soon, probably within a couple
Awesome.
episodes, I'll be
PM.
putting the link in the description. My band, my record. I you know what I will bury at the end of the podcast. It seems like my old chiptune music might be making a comeback pretty soon. I got asked to play at a local Pride event, and so I think I'm cracking the old
Yeah.
Game Boys back out. So there may be a resurgence of KT's chiptune projects. So
Hell yeah.
look out for that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's something. Cracking the banjo out again, getting my plucking fingers in time. But that's for another day. Thanks again for coming on. Good night, y'all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.